Gaseous exchange requires you to have knowledge of how gases exchange at the lungs and at the muscle sites. A couple of general points first, so a couple of terms that you need to be aware of. So the first one is diffusion. So we need to know about diffusion and the fact that it takes place from an area of high concentration or pressure, and it goes to an area of low concentration. So diffusion always goes from that high to low. So we need to know this, and also putting that into an answer for this question can pick you up a mark. The second thing we need to know about is partial pressure. Okay, so and this essentially is the percentage of each gas in the overall mix. So we talk about pressure of oxygen or partial pressure of oxygen. It doesn't really matter whether you go with 1p or 2p's. And we also talk about the pressure of carbon dioxide or partial pressure of carbon dioxide. So these are things again that when we get into the actual answer that we need to know about. But essentially all we're talking about there is we're talking about how much oxygen is in the mix and how much carbon dioxide is in the mix. And that links to the diffusion as to if one is higher than the other, then we need to even it out. So first, gas exchange at the lungs. So I think in gaseous exchange we need to have an element of common sense. So the first thing to remember is what we're trying to do when we exercise. So one of the key elements is the fact that we need to get oxygen in. So oxygen is coming in to the lungs, we're breathing it in. And one of the other things is that to remember that this blood that comes back from the muscles and enters the capillaries in and around the lungs is full of carbon dioxide, because we've created that as a waste product of exercise, and so this blood is deoxygenated. So what we then say is that in the blood here that the pressure of carbon dioxide is high, and obviously the pressure of carbon dioxide in the lungs is low because there's not much in there. At the same time, the pressure of oxygen in the alveoli within the lungs is high because we've just breathed it in, and the pressure in this blood, the pressure of oxygen is low. So linking back to what we just talked about with partial pressures and diffusion, remember that we always go from a high pressure to a low pressure. So basically the pressure of carbon dioxide is higher in the blood, in the capillaries, than it is in the alveoli. So that's how we get, we'll use blue. That's how we get the carbon dioxide diffusing from the capillaries into the alveoli. Now remember, we're doing that with the purpose of then breathing it out. Okay, so we get it into the lungs in order to breathe it out and get rid of it. Now at the same time, remember that we're saying that the pressure of oxygen in this blood coming past in the capillaries is low, and the pressure of oxygen in the lungs, in the alveoli, is high. So again, this is how we get, because of that difference, the oxygen diffuses from the alveoli into the capillaries. So we can see the change here in the blood, that it's starting to become more coloured and leaves as red, and it's now oxygenated. It's full of oxygen. The pressure of oxygen is high. So this is what we want. Remember, this is a good thing, that this blood will then travel down towards the heart and then therefore be pumped around the body to be delivered to the muscles later on. So the whole point of gas exchange at the lungs, remember, is to let's get some oxygen into the system, in other words into the blood, into the capillaries, and let's try and get the carbon dioxide out of our system that we're creating, that waste, that nasty waste product, so we can breathe it out. So to break that down into an actual exam question answer, basically we want 5 points. So number 1, mention that diffusion goes from high to low. Number 2, talk about pressure of oxygen. Alright, that it's high in the alveoli and low in the capillaries, as we've just found out. Number 3, say where oxygen then diffuses. So oxygen diffuses from the alveoli into the capillaries. Number 4, talk about the pressure of carbon dioxide, high in the capillaries and low in the alveoli. And then number 5, talk about where carbon dioxide goes. It diffuses from the capillaries into the alveoli. Those 5 marks, those 5 points will get you full marks on this question. So here's an example. This was actually a 3-mark question, as you can see how gaseous exchange occurs in the lungs. 3 points on the mark scheme, so but they combine the three marks combine the 5 points that we've just made. So the first point, this was our first point, point 2 on the mark scheme, about that diffusion goes from high to low. And then for point 1 here, that you needed to say where oxygen goes. Alright, so it goes from the alveoli into the blood, and that carbon dioxide goes from blood into the lungs. And point 3 was for the partial pressures, so the 2 bits of partial pressure that we've talked about. Say where O2 is higher, i.e. it's in the lungs and the blood, and say where pressure of oxygen is higher, in other words in the blood rather than in the lungs. So some mark schemes might give you all 5 on there as separate points. This particular one required you to say all 5 for the 3 marks. So gas exchange at the muscle tissue, very similar in terms of how we're going to structure our answer, but obviously we've got some different and in fact some opposite answers. So we've got this blood that, remember, we're saying came down from the lungs, pumped around the heart, remembering that the pressure of oxygen in this blood is high. So here it comes. And in the muscles over here, so this being the muscles, this is the muscle tissue here, that the pressure of oxygen is really low. Now the obvious thing about that is that the muscles are using the oxygen for energy, and therefore the pressure of oxygen is low. So again, we look at the principle of diffusion. It's high over here in the blood, and it's low over here in the muscle tissue, and therefore oxygen is jumping from the hemoglobin, we can see it on here, and into the muscle. Is this what we want? Of course it is. So again, a common sense answer is a good check that we get that oxygen diffusing from the blood into the muscle tissue. At the same time, these muscles are creating carbon dioxide, so the pressure of carbon dioxide is really high. And obviously, because the blood is oxygenated, the pressure of carbon dioxide in the blood is really low. So again, because of this, we go from high to low. So the pressure of carbon dioxide diffuses from the muscle tissue into those capillaries. And remember that this deoxygenated blood, as it goes past now, will then leave and make its way back up to the heart to be pumped back up to the lungs, and that's where we started on the previous slide. So just putting that into an exam answer. Again, talk about number 1, diffusion. So mention your high to low, and then secondly, your pressure of oxygen, where it's high and low, and therefore where oxygen therefore diffuses into the muscle, and then the pressure of carbon dioxide that it's high in the muscle will in the capillaries, and that carbon dioxide diffuses from the muscles into the capillaries. Do your common sense check. Is that what we want? Of course it is. We want the oxygen into the muscle, and we want the carbon dioxide back into the capillaries, into the blood, so we can get it back up to be breathed out. So here's a question. How gaseous exchange occurs at the muscle tissue? So again, we've got those 3 points. We've got the diffusion bit, then we've got where carbon dioxide goes and where oxygen goes, and then it's due to those partial pressures, so the pressure of oxygen and the pressure of carbon dioxide. So again, those 5 points will get you those 3 marks. Just one last question that fits into this topic. So the structural features of the lungs that assist diffusion. So a few answers here. So in terms of allowing diffusion to happen, the alveoli have a large surface area. Alright, so lots of space in the alveoli that allows diffusion to take place a lot more easily. Therefore, large blood supply. The fact that the alveoli are 1 cell thick, in other words, they are thin. Again, that's easy to diffuse through in the alveoli, and that makes it a short diffusion distance. There's also a layer of moisture within the alveoli which assists that process, and we have small capillaries which allows more time.